And that lung infection actually stemmed, funny enough,
Long COVID?
my lungs were weakened, yes, from COVID-19 that I contracted during the Easter period last year. You know, and that's a few months well in between. So it goes to show that down the line, when you contract COVID-19, if you think that, okay, I'm over it, I'm better, I'm not showing any symptoms, you need to take care of yourself. You know, you need to continue to treat yourself and treat your body as though it's a temple, as they always say. You know, you continue to eat healthy, continue to exercise, and that may sound quite ironic coming from me, because there are probably some individuals this morning saying, "Wow, Keaton, you should practice what you preach." But no, necessarily, you have to eat healthy, you have to exercise, you have to take care of yourself. And if you don't do that, even though you contracted COVID-19 last year, the effects that it has had, it's had on your body, it can really cause any illness, any form of illness, especially illnesses that affect your lungs, your respiratory system, that can pop up anytime.
I think COVID has more or less given just one more reason why lifestyle diseases need to be taken care of. But back to the issue at hand with regards to Carnival, I guess that's where a lot of people are wondering what's going to happen there. I don't think we've seen enough to say, hey, let's put a break on all of the economic activity. It's similar to the lockdown. You have to weigh the pros and cons. I haven't seen enough to suggest that we should go into any form of restriction or lockdown just yet.
Actually, that's
yet.
It's a debatable point. Let us expand on the financial arguments that you're putting forward, so the economics of it all. But also, there's another thing that we could debate, and that is restrictions for incoming passengers out of mainland China. A lot to debate there.
Well, that's very specific, but we'll get into that later.
We will. So we'll just take a break here on Talking Point now, and when we return, well, the conversation continues. We'll be right back after this.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
The best birthday gifts are at thebesttoys.com. Shop for the best brands you love at the best prices. Like VTech, Leapfrog, Fisher-Price, Play-Doh, Hot Wheels, Barbie, Cocomelon, LOL, Baby Alive, Crayola.
Visit us in-store at Forces Flagship MacBean. Shop online now at thebesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 32DBEST to order. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity, from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
I am Rondell Donowa, attorney at law and host of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Strictly Legal is a legal program geared towards informing you, the public, of your legal rights, responsibilities, and remedies. So be viewing Thursdays 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m. only on WESN, Content Capital.
On the next episode of Nicole Larson Live, living in victory every day.
I live with my dad at the time, so what is he going to say? He has invested so much into me and into my studies and, you know, where I was going in life. And then, you know, to come to him with these news. So the first thing I did legit after finding out I was pregnant was actually trying to make a call to see how I could get rid of it.
Which is that we shouldn't condemn others for the mistakes that they would have made.
Whether it's your savings or the business savings, deduct a small amount first and set it aside for a rainy day.
Replaying situations in your mind, questioning yourself if you did or said something wrong, pushes you right into the circle of anxiety.
From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God.
No matter what they say, living in victory every day.
Nicole Larson Live, living in victory every day. Every Sunday at 8 p.m. and Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. on WESN.
Welcome back to Talking Point here on WESN Content Capital. Thank you for staying with us, ladies and gentlemen. So, as the conversation continues this morning and we were talking about COVID-19, well, overall, there are two things to debate. Whether or not Carnival will go ahead or remain, or whether or not there should be restrictions on passengers traveling from mainland China. Now, we've seen countries around the world implement such restrictions. Most recently, our neighbor in Guyana, well, they announced restrictions with respect to testing, that a negative test must be submitted in order to travel to Guyana for any passengers from mainland China. And that was actually cut down, that was shut down. That's as far as I'm aware, that's no longer in play. So there's a lot to debate actually with the time that we have left. Sean, should we start with Carnival? Because you last touched on it just before we took the break.
Yeah, I don't think anything has to change for Carnival yet. I do think that the responsible thing, though, is to warn the population that, listen, there will always be that possibility depending on the numbers, right? That said, the numbers right now technically are nowhere near as bad as the numbers were when we opened. So this is very much a judgment call. But we need to understand that if people really want Carnival to be open, you can't then go and blame the government for keeping Carnival open after the fact, if anything goes wrong. Because to some extent, I would think and hope the government will take into consideration what the population expresses. Obviously, if they have hard and fast information that says this is a good idea or a bad idea, you know, measurable facts, they have to that takes precedence. But if it's a situation where, look, we don't necessarily have any big indicator that anything bad is going to happen. Now, if there's an outbreak if there's a major outbreak of COVID in New York that stems from JFK or LaGuardia, then it's like, well, what are we saying? A lot of the people coming in will potentially be coming through that airport. Same with Miami, same with London. If we see major COVID outbreaks that could be traced back to major international airport hubs, that we know the flights to bring in the tourists coming in for Carnival, that's happening there. Now we have to really start to give it a lot more thought about, should we restrict travelers? Should we block travelers? I do think if we take foreigners, tourists coming in, I do think it should be relatively safe because we should not have that much international travel where we're going to, you know, it would take a whole wave, global wave for it to affect us. But because we have tourists coming in from major international airports, that is something that I'm a little bit concerned
I am
about.
obviously concerned about the effects of COVID-19 and Carnival. I mean, this is precisely what we saw in 2019, just before we went into, or 2020, sorry, before we went into lockdowns. We knew about what was happening with COVID-19 around the world. The Minister of Health was speaking to us. As I mentioned, I think it was yesterday, there were many times that he mentioned he wears very large shoes because he often suffers from foot and mouth disease. At that point, he was saying the chances of COVID-19 reaching our shores are practically zero. We went ahead with Carnival. We knew the effects of COVID-19.
Well, I think at that time, too, the problem was he was speaking in absolutes without having enough data to speak in absolutes.
I remember following this story since November, the year prior. And, you know, we saw what happened after Carnival, right? We've lived through it over the last few years, and now I am concerned because when I heard that the Prime Minister was hosting a press conference, I decided to make a few calls to those working within the public health system. Now, I cannot call names for obvious reasons, but without actually having any sort of evidence or proof in front of me, and solely going by the words of those within the public health system, I have been told that the numbers that are being put forward for COVID-19 currently are actually, they're not the entire figure. So they do not actually translate to what is the reality. The figures are much higher, and they are seeing an influx of cases every day within the public health system. Further to this, there's been silence thus far. Today, that silence would be broken. But if doctors in the public health system are already seeing an increase and they are saying that the numbers are not being reported as to what is reality, they're being understated,
I do wonder.
Then that fuels my concerns even more, that we're going into Carnival knowing exactly what's going to happen. On the flip side, the government has invested $147 million in Carnival. And I use the term invested because we just simply cannot afford to not have Carnival now.
Well, the irony is, as I was driving around Savannah this morning, I do have to ask the question. I'm not entirely sure about this specific answer because it's not tied into another situation that I got wind of, which I won't necessarily state because I can't corroborate it. But the Carnival booths usually around in Savannah, those things go up. Sometimes it seems like Boxing Day they start putting those things
they
up
did actually.
on a huge. No, but there's like 3 or 4 here and 2 or 3 there, and that's it. You know, before it used to literally be like a village, to the point where I kind of wondered, some of these seem redundant. Are we really going to, are all of these vendors really going to make all that money? Because I don't think a lot of bands pass by Napa, that part of the Savannah, anymore. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. But with regards to the necessity of Carnival, yes, you could argue we need, because there's so much, you know, we need the money to continue to circulate, and to some extent, certain sectors need the boost as well, right? Especially since certain industries were actually based around the Carnival, and if they die, we need to understand, oh, well, you know, it's only, you know, it's not necessary. No, but the problem is, people on the breadline just expand the burden to the rest of the economy trying to stay afloat. So we need to understand that. There is a societal incentive for you might be fine. You might have a high-paying job and be fine. There's an incentive even for you to ensure that the economy is running well and everybody has a job, because there are indirect benefits to everybody. It's all interlinked. So we need, yes. And that's why I said I did not necessarily see enough to say, let's cancel Carnival. Now, with regards to the numbers, it could be a product basically because we would have had travel for Christmas. So not only would we have had more people just going between Tobago and Trinidad, in planes, in the ferry, we would have had people go abroad, come back. We would have had foreigners come in, right? And again, of course, all of the air travel will to some extent mix in Piarco. The international and domestic flights will mix in Piarco, right? So we're a bit more vulnerable. I get that. To what extent are the numbers being underreported. That is concerning. And then the key is, if they did do contact tracing, but if they're underreporting the numbers, it does beg the question, are they really, keeping up with contact tracing now? Then could that be an indicator of what to expect with regards to travel and the risk of tourists coming in for Carnival? And perhaps and hopefully the Prime Minister, you see, now we're going to a leadership function. It's not necessarily his job to anticipate everything, but it's the job of his advisors. Okay, anticipate all of the various scenarios. Both the medical technical people and the communication people. The communication people will both of them will figure out, okay, what questions might the population have that we need to answer to assuage fears. Either way that he goes, whether it is to put some sort of measures into place, a lot of measures into place, or no measures into place, we would hope to get a good enough explanation so that we would understand the reality of where we are at right now. Because the last thing we want is some sort of medical disaster. I don't think we could bear it.
All right, well, we have about 5 minutes left for this particular segment, and I'm going to get into this topic. I don't think it's enough time, but we must touch on it with respect to visitors from mainland China. Mm-hmm. There were restrictions in Ghana. I've been told that those restrictions are no longer in place. We're seeing restrictions around the world. I think South Korea actually stopped processing visas for passengers coming from China, and in return, China did the same to South Korean citizens traveling to China. So there's a lot politically going around the world, and diplomacy right now is at a tense moment. It is a critical time and a crucial time, even considering the world economic crisis. Because let's face it, there is an economic crisis.
Yeah, we're still.
But do you think that Trinidad and Tobago should, and if so, is it that it's just too late now to implement restrictions? Because since China reopened its borders, I'm sure there's been an influx of citizens from China.
Yeah, but how much frequent travel do we have? Yes, of course, there are Chinese nationals that come to Trinidad. How much frequent travel do we have? To what extent? We have to understand too. We might be saying, oh yeah, let's restrict travel. Now, on one hand, all it takes is one person to infect. We know this, right? On the other hand, we might be putting a measure, okay, we might block a few people, a handful of people, because the bulk of the tourists coming in for Carnival are going to be the diaspora, are going to be people
a lot of Chinese people come to Trinidad for Carnival. They love Carnival. They love Carnival, yeah.
Well, all right. I mean, but again, is it enough to say, well, we're going to block them? It's a bit of a...
you see, the thing is, whether or not we could...
it might seem callous, but how many people are you actually blocking from coming in? And what is the actual risk of it? Because to some extent, I will say this, in East Asian culture, now that they understand, they always took things like the flu and colds and viruses seriously. That's why wearing masks was a lot more common well before COVID in Southeast Asia than in other parts of the world, including here. And to some extent, when the numbers rose in China, people isolated themselves. So culturally speaking,
putting all that aside for a moment, let's be a little honest with each other here. Mm-hmm. Even if we can have that debate about very specifics, culturally, and whether or not, what is the number coming in, and it takes one person. Even if there was a surge, and even if there were infected passengers, or because not everything is detected. The virus could be in you, and it could be
We've had people be negative, fly, and then positive when they land.
Exactly. And the TT Travel Pass system is no longer...
I don't know. It's just whatever that was.
Trinidad and Tobago simply cannot, on a diplomatic level, considering our relationship with China, and considering how much China is of support to Trinidad and Tobago's
that's more or less where I was getting to.
The government will not take that risk. And as I said, I'm really anxious to see what the Prime Minister speaks of later. I wonder if he's coming to...
I think the key is...
The government simply cannot, in any form or fashion, limit travel to passengers from mainland China.
Here's the reason why. You can limit travel from passengers to mainland China, but they're still traveling, which means that they're within the sphere of international travel. there's exposure. And that's where you kind of have to ask the question, to what extent would it really make a difference? Because COVID is global. So to try to isolate one country might be just an uphill battle that makes no sense.
And also considering that, and I'm being practical.
And yes, because you're right about that.
Because of the economics of it, considering the loans that we have with China, the Chinese labor, that is also very much a part of the project, such as the A.N.R. Robinson International Airport, considering financing and donations from the Chinese government. Our relationship with China is actually crucial to our economy at this point. I mean, I'm not very much in support of it because of the Belt and Road Initiative, and I think that when you become in debt to China, really, it's how do I say this in the most politically correct manner? Yes, you owe them money, but
the road to hell is paved in good intentions.
The Chinese have you in the palm of their hands anytime you forge such a relationship.
One thing to consider, the travel relationship between Korea and China, I think, will be much different than, say, us and China, Guyana and China.
No,
right?
It surely will be different. But and by the way, Guyana has gotten a lot of financing and also a lot of projects put forward, investment from China. It's going to be the same. It's the same thing in Trinidad and Tobago. You can make the argument actually that China owns a great part, a great share of the Trinidad and Tobago economy. So I mean, feel free to call in and express your opinions later. But ladies and gentlemen, for now we have to take a break on the program. When we return, well, we'll welcome our guest this morning.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
AM Prime on WESN, the only place from 6 to 7:30 a.m. where you can get the most analytical and thorough interviews and regional reports.
The Barbados Labour Party, led by the Prime Minister Mia Amor-Motley, once again able to achieve a clean sweep in yesterday's general election.
I think a lot of people have underestimated the power of Tobago nationalism.
If the government is afraid to say it, I, Martin George, I am saying it this morning on your show, Andy, there will be no carnival before Ash Wednesday.
Grab a cup of coffee and start your day right watching AM Prime with Andy Johnson weekdays from 6 a.m. Only on your content capital, WESN.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
Coming back. Welcome back to Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, we have had for various different topics, been asked to speak about more on Tobago. One of our callers yesterday actually wanted to ask a specific question with regards to the tourism product on the island. Of course, I myself have somewhat of an interest just generally on tourism and the private economy in Tobago. And to speak on the industry here, we have, of course, the president of the Tobago Hoteliers and Tourism Association, Mr. Chris James. Good morning, Mr. James. How are you?
Good morning. I'm fine, and I hope all your viewers and listeners are fine as well. So good morning to everyone.
Well,
good morning.
Thank you, of course, for being here on a bit of a short notice. Of course, we've spoken before on Talking Point about some of the challenges with tourism, especially when things were about to reopen. It wasn't that easy. From what I understand, for some people, both in Trinidad and Tobago, it still isn't easy. I think there's one of the hotels in the Port of Spain area that is still dealing with challenges coming out of trying to recover over the last 2 years, and they didn't necessarily have some of the specific challenges Tobago hotels had. So what has it been like now? You've had Tobago Carnival, you've had the Christmas and Old Year's, New Year's season. We've had a few months now of being open. What are things just generally like for the industry over there right now?
Well, things are improving. It's going to be a slow climb, I'm afraid. It's a mountain to climb. Having been closed for so long, we're having to re-engage with the tour operators and airlines, so that's taken a while, but we're getting there. British Airways is doing very well, and we have the Condor flight as well from Germany, so those flights are doing well. We still have problems on the air bridge, not enough flights on the air bridge, so I get the majority of my complaints are from Trinidad. People trying to come from Trinidad because we're down to a lot less flights than we had before. We're down to 12 instead of 20. Even though we're pushing to get more, I'm not sure when that's going to happen. And of course, I'm still pushing to get the in-transit desk, because we do get people come through via PRCO, international flights, and sometimes they have a very bad experience. So we're trying to get that in-transit desk done. But I think things are generally improving, and some hotels are doing better than others. But it's been much better, of course, than the last 2 years. Quite as good as 2019 yet.
No, actually, sir, I was just wondering, well, recently the Tobago House of Assembly actually hailed a $300 million income due to the carnival. I mean, how much has the carnival in Tobago benefited hotels? I mean, it was very difficult to get a flight to Tobago, and now even over the Christmas period into the New Year's, that was also very much tricky. I think you just mentioned the reduction in flights over the air bridge. But is it, I mean, yes, we understand that Tobago has its seasons with respect to foreign tourists and then inter-island tourists. How much is Tobago and Tobago hoteliers now depending on these festivals or these seasons to ensure that there is some flow of income?
Well, it's interesting. In 2019, about 70% of our occupancy was domestic from Trinidad. So that's a very large proportion of our occupancy. Now, we have to improve on the international scene. As you may know, since 2005, the international arrivals have declined, and we're in the process now of rebuilding that with the help of Digicel, the Tobago Tourism Agency. So that's a priority, is to get more international visitors. But yes, that lack of availability on the air bridges has not helped. It will not help if it continues, because we will not reach the figures that we had in 2019 because of that. And also we've had a few problems on the ferries. But generally, those festivals, whether it's Carnival or any of the other festivals that we promote as a destination, they're critically important to us, because we do get a large domestic crowd for those festivals. So that helps buoy up our occupancy. So those are very important. The Carnival, Heritage, all of those things that we do, Blue Food, they're all important. We've got Jazz coming up in April. So it's important that we continue those festivals so that we get that activity. But as I say, we have to continue the work on the international and hopefully get some more relief on the air bridge.
With regards to the international, just a quick follow-up, because in previous talks, one of the things that came out more or less is the lack of marketing. Has there been any improvement on that front? Because ironically, just about every year, Tobago pops up in some list as one of the best unheard of destinations or untouched destinations. But that's literally all the international marketing I see for the year. The only time I rarely see Tobago, highlighted in a significant way. Has that improved?
Yes, it has. We've been doing some great marketing with British Airways, for instance. We've had notice boards and electronic devices in tube stations in London. Oh. And the figures for British Airways are very good. We're very pleased with those figures for British Airways. And we're doing joint marketing campaigns with other tour operators. So that is improving. Of course, we have never, Trinidad and Tobago have never spent the kind of money that the other destinations do. So it's difficult to compare apples and pears, but it's improving. We've starting again almost after COVID. Not only have we been to things like World Travel Market and Marketplace, the HTA Marketplace, to reintroduce Tobago to the market, which is critically important because what's happened during COVID, a lot of staff left from the tour operating companies, the international tour operating companies. Some people change jobs and work for other companies. So it's a case of re-engaging with those people, getting to know them again, showing that Tobago is open, which we're doing, and pushing that message out there. And it is having an effect. It's not going to be overnight because, as I said, we don't have the kind of money that the other destinations have. But also, we started much later. Don't forget, Trinidad and Tobago opened much later than most of the other destinations in the region. Some of them opened 6 months before us. So they've had a running start. But I'm pleased with the way it's going, and I think we have a lot more work to do, but it's good.
Well, I must admit that when I do listen to British radio, I do hear a lot of advertisements from British Airways promoting Tobago. And there's always some special with Tobago hotel rooms. They do a package, actually. And I'm always very proud when I hear that. But you just mentioned there is a lot to do. There's still a lot to do. Now, with the anticipation that the tourist market will continue to improve, as you would have elaborated on this morning, what has the investment from hoteliers been in the sense that even though they're now recouping their losses over the last few years, we are expecting more travelers. British Airways numbers are looking good, and the domestic market has been considerably good, considering everything. That being said, when I mention investment, yesterday one of our viewers asked about the service on the island. And has there been an investment in terms of training of staff to deal with foreign tourists? And apart from that, what is the labor or the availability of labor like on the island? Are people willing to work or wanting to work?
Let me just add to that as well, because as a service industry, customer service is important. And we have heard both good and bad, right? Of course, in TNT, customer service is one of those things that a lot of people perceive to just be bad generally throughout the country. So has that been a challenge? And as my co-host asked, has there been any steps to try to improve upon it in the industry?
Yes, there has. Through the Division of Tourism and implemented by TTEL, the tourism agency, we're doing a 3-year program of customer service, which started, we relaunched it. It was actually launched during COVID, but it didn't really work because the staff weren't employed. But now it's been relaunched. It's got to be a couple of months ago now. And we're doing training sessions for customer service, not just in the tourism industry, but across the whole island. It's going to be a fantastic program for people to join in. And yes, customer service generally, it's not just Trinidad and Tobago. Customer service in the region isn't great. I traveled to Cayman Islands and to Puerto Rico recently, and I think we bash ourselves or compare ourselves too unfavorably sometimes because I had bad customer service in both of those destinations. But so it's a thing that everybody is trying to improve. You get bad customer service in London or New York. So, but it's critically important for us as a tourism destination to make people want to come back. One of the things we can save money on in marketing is if we get a word of mouth repeat guest return, which will happen if we get great customer service. So it's important we do that. You also mentioned about what hotels have done. Properties have done that. I think it was 126 properties took advantage of that and did some upgrading. And they've also done their own upgrading. It's difficult because finances are very tight. You've got to remember we didn't earn any money for 2 years, and things have been very tough. So I think the collaboration with the Hotel Association and the division and the agency is working very well for the industry. And I think we can only go from strength to strength if we all pull together. As I say, it's a mountain to climb, but we started the climb.
Well, Mr. James, as you know, I respect what you're saying with finances being tight. I think for almost everyone, almost everyone in Trinidad and Tobago, finances have been very tight. But it's all well and good what you're saying, and I'm happy for that. Is there a willingness, though, for hoteliers to invest more in their product, in the sense that whilst you mentioned that some hotels have actually taken advantage of certain measures and actually upgraded the facilities, I personally find there's still a lot of rooms in Tobago that you actually pay to stay in and are rather poor. So is it that we're seeing a willingness now from hoteliers to invest more in their facilities, in their rooms, because you mentioned customer service, but you know the facilities are absolutely crucial for word of mouth marketing as well?
Yes, people will invest once we start making some money. At the moment, it's impossible to invest because loans have increased. I mean, some people now owe more money than they did 2 years ago, 3 years ago, because, as I said, we earn no money. It's a different situation in Tobago. You see, you have a population in Trinidad that, even though it was suffering, it had economic activity because of the size of the population. Our population is so small, there was little to no economic activity. So it's not a false claim to say that we earned nothing for 2 years. There was nothing coming through, and there were still bills to be paid. So I am sure and I'm confident that hotels, as they make money, will invest. You asked me about staffing. Interestingly, just before Christmas, we started advertising for hotel staff. And in 4 days, we got 130 applicants. And it's increasing every week, we get more. But I was quite pleasantly surprised that so many people are keen to get back in the industry because confidence was hit. There's no two ways about it, both for the investor, the hotelier, the restaurateur, whoever, the tour operator, tour guide. Our confidence was hit badly with those 2 years of suffering. And the staff, of course, they were hurt badly as well. So I'm very pleased to say that that ongoing initiative to create positions for staff is still building steam. We will have, and I believe that we will not have the amount of staff we need as new hotels come on. So that's another challenge in the future. But I think the combination of the customer service training, the increased traffic, the increased availability of rooms that are being sold, and the increased marketing that we're able to do, I think we are on the right path.
Well, so that leads me to my final question. Now, I know that the bottleneck of the air and sea bridge, that is probably one concern that you might have. But is there any other major concerns that perhaps, or some change that you would like to see? I know, of course, the reserve from the electricity charges where hotels more or less had to pay a fixed rate even when closed, even when, the breakers were shut off. That was one challenge. The bar license for both for hotels with restaurants and bars, that was another challenge. You had to pay for your bar that was not operating for 1 year so that you could get the license for the year where you are actually operating. Is there anything else that is still a critical issue that you would like to see improved, and how might you like to see that improved?
Well, just on those things, like the reserve capacity, the bar license, it made a mockery of actually the grant that was given, because the reserve capacity for many was more than the grant. So it really is something that needs to be looked into. I mean, the ease of doing business in Trinidad and Tobago has not got any easier. And we have to look at, if we want to encourage people to invest and we want people to get on with their job, their main job, but we don't want to be bogged down with problems paying reserve capacity and things. So we want to get on with serving our customers and generating an economy in Tobago. So yes, those things need to be changed. The one thing I really want to change as soon as I can is this in-transit desk. If we can get the in-transit desk and more flights on the air bridge, that will help us much better than they are at the moment for this year coming, because that's where we need help. That will soften some of the problems that we're having during the remainder of this year as we build our international flights and marketing. So lots to be positive about, but there's still lots of challenges, and we'll work through them. We'll get things done, but it's things that could be made easier. The ease of doing business needs to be looked into properly, and we need to make things much easier for people to operate a business and succeed.
Mr. James, I want to thank you very much for joining us this morning. You've actually, you've gone into an entirely different topic in this that is very much pertinent to the conversation, but also to the whole of Trinidad and Tobago. That's the ease of doing business. I wish we had more time, but we'll have to end it there for now. Thank you very much for joining us, and all the very best to you. I hope Caribbean Airlines is listening. I know that you have been very vocal about this, but interestingly, it's not just for Tobago. It's around the Caribbean as well. It's extremely expensive to travel around the Caribbean, to even get a flight if you're lucky. So I really hope so.
You can't stop me there, because I've just got to jump. I went to the IATA conference. That is a critical point you've just raised. The taxes on regional flights are ridiculous. They're usually 100% of what the actual ticket fare is. And if we want to encourage people to move around this region, which would be an excellent thing to do, both from business and tourism, we need to really get together. I understand there was a CARICOM understanding to do that, but it's never been delivered. And that ease of doing business, again, that taxation, I know when I was in Cayman, the flight to Jamaica from Cayman, the actual tax was more than the flight.
Wow.
And it's ridiculous. Anyway, I'm glad to see we've all got beards.
All right, Mr. James, thank you so much. With that, we will have to end it there, because we have news on the hour, and of course, afterwards, we have to open up the phone lines for the viewers to weigh in on the situation. We welcome callers from Tobago, but we have news on the hour next.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. James. Keep well. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back after this.
Here's your WESN News on the Hour. I am Denise Martin. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Duke not faced by PDP resignations. Works Minister addresses Tabaquite Road issues. 1 suspect held and 7 stolen vehicles recovered. And internationally, more than 1,200 to be charged for Brazil riot. Now for the details. PDP leader Watson Duke says the recent resignation within the party is irrelevant. Speaking on the latest resignation of Marlon Rajman, Duke said he was unaware there were any issues.
Issues are unknown to us, but I say this to you. Mr. Rajman is not of concern to the executive, because we understand fully well what teams are to manage. Teams go through some stages. One of the very important stages after forming is storming. And so what we are seeing now is a storm. But would the storm last long?
Works and Transport Minister Rohan Sinanan said remedial works will continue in affected areas within the Couva Tabaquite Talparo Regional Corporation.
So we cannot run away from the fact that the Tabaquite area is an area that has always been prone to landslips going back the last 50 years. And it all has to do again with the soil type in the area. We do at the Ministry of Works, we are responsible for certain sections of the Tabaquite area where we are faced with some challenges as well with landslips. We do have some programs ongoing.
Diligent work by officers has led to the recovery of 7 motor vehicles which were reported stolen across several divisions and the arrest of 1 suspect in ongoing anti-crime exercises. Between the period December 29th, 2022 and January 10th, 2023, officers made several recoveries. The TTPS urges vehicle owners to take all necessary precautions to make their vehicles hard targets for criminals. Such precautions include investing in anti-theft devices for vehicles such as GPS systems, alarms, and kill switches. In international news now, more than 1,200 people have been formally arrested and are being charged in relation to the riot at Brazil's Congress. Authorities have 5 days to charge suspects who have been formally arrested. In total, more than 1,500 people were detained after the riot. Concerns about potential further protests have prompted a large security forces deployment in Brazil's capital. Well, that was News to the Hour on WESN. I am Denise Martin. Thanks for watching.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Well, welcome back to Talking Point, and you know, I'm so sorry. First of all, thank you very much to Denise Martin for News on the Hour. But I'm so sorry that that conversation with Mr. James has to end where it did, because the ease of doing business and how it's affecting tourism domestically and regionally, as well as him going to the IATA conference and having learned that the tax on airline tickets, regional flights, is almost 100% of the cost of the ticket, and in some instances higher than the actual cost of the ticket. We have a lot to talk about. We can't get into all of it today, but I'm so sorry that's where the conversation has to end.
Well, I also like to bring up the fact, because you asked them about the customer service issue, and of course he said, well, they're making improvements. One thing he did say, and it might seem like a cop-out, is we compare ourselves too harshly. I actually do think that there's some truth to that. First of all, I do know that also with the state of rooms in some of those, you know, islands where you expect things to be so much more well put together than Tobago, because their tourism product is a well-oiled machine. No, some of those places, the rooms also could be old, could look a little rundown. You know, that's not, I mean, there's a difference between looking old and actually being broken down, right? As well as you see some of the practices that we might complain about in Tobago. Like, why do we have to have security deposits on things? There are security deposits on things in hotels in the States. So we do need to realize if we travel enough, some, not all, some of the situations are understandable. But with regards to customer service, because that was specifically brought up by the caller, I will say this. I do think perhaps maybe the issue is just generally our labor markets and our service industries, they don't have the competitiveness. It's not that they can't compete abroad with foreign products. It's that we don't push the competitiveness of the industries. So we just kind of get by with whatever we could get.
Sean, you've made it public. You've made it very public that you have a stake in Tobago tourism. So there are no bones about it. So I know that you will advocate and try to be as honest as you can with respect to tourism in Tobago. You just mentioned something which really hit me. There is a difference between being, you know, broken down and just being old, right? Now, if I go to a hotel in Tobago, I pay my good money, my hard-earned money, I go to a hotel room, and there's cobweb, there's dead moss, and there's a poo all over.
Oh, well, yeah, that's
right?
bad. That's bad.
And that's happened recently. Then, you know, but I'll get into that shortly, because you're right. Let's go to this. Let's open up the phone lines, because we already have a caller.
Yeah, we already have a caller from St. James.
From St. Anne's.
From St. Anne's.
Good morning, caller.
Hello.
Hi, good morning.
Hey, how's it going?
Things are good.
Pardon me?
Things are good. You have something you want to comment on or ask?
Yeah, so I mean, my family just got back from Tobago. We spent a few days there. It was absolutely unbelievable. And I'll tell you this, man. I live in a small province in Canada called Prince Edward Island. You Google it; it's right on the Atlantic Ocean. And you know, we have all kinds of beaches. We're known for our beaches in Canada. And I gotta admit, I hate to say it, your beaches are way better. I mean, it's like being in a totally different ocean. It was absolutely unreal and a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
And they've always, okay, so the natural environment was actually a very good experience. I'm glad to hear that. But what about customer service, interaction with locals on the islands, even the hotel facilities of which you stayed at? Talk to us about that. What was your experience like?
You know what? It was great. There were so many really nice people. I had a great experience at the bar one night. My wife and I went up, and she ordered a rum punch, and the bartender handed her the rum punch, and she takes a sip, and she's like, "Oh my God, it's delicious." And I turned to the bartender. I go, "What's in it?" And he looks at me and he goes, "Vacation, man." And I mean, it was great, you know.
So is it that you are expecting to make more trips to Tobago in the future? Is it that you're also going to probably persuade your friends, your family, your colleagues to visit Tobago?
Oh, absolutely. I would 100% go back to Tobago again. I'd bring my family. I would take friends and stuff like that. If we could do like a big, you know, friends trip somewhere, it's great. The prices on stuff are reasonable.
Yes.
The prices on the resorts are reasonable, and you know, the drinks are always cold. So I'd be pumped to come back.
Do you have any criticisms at all, any recommendations that you might make?
You know, I'm not sure, man. I think in general, we really enjoyed our time there. I think you know, the people were super social. Yeah, I don't really have many, you know, criticisms or things I would improve. Just, you know, I'd be interested to see 5 years from now how the area gets built up and how everything evolves. And I think if you guys continue to do that, it'd be amazing.
Oh, that's excellent. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for calling in and giving us your experience. It's always good to hear from someone who's an actual paying customer what their trip was like.
There we go. Well, no problem. And next time I come down, you guys will have to buy me a beer somewhere, a carrot.
Not a problem.
No problem. Nope, definitely.
Not a problem. Keep well. Thank you very much.
No problem. Have a great day.
You too.
You too. Have a good trip home, and hopefully you get to enjoy some more time in Trinidad. But
no, I was just about to say, don't go home as yet. Stay for Carnival.
The thing is, though, I do think there is the elephant in the room is, especially now, when we have international tourists who are more experienced, they will be able to understand the difference between, you know, what is just, you know, the challenges of travel and what is a real issue of bad service or poor products. Now, with regards to, we also have that sort of interesting interplay of when we have local domestic tourism going on. And I think that these situations are treated somewhat differently for good and bad reasons.
I want to get back into what I was stating before the caller, you know, and I'm appreciative of the call, calling in to tell us more of your experience.
Yeah.
But we have a caller now with us from San Fernando. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Hey, morning.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you very much. I was surprised that you could have gotten Mr. James on.
Well, credit to Mr. James. Credit to Mr. James for that, for agreeing. So
well, I think he was a little short on the question of the customer service, and I think that was a cop-out in trying to talk about it being bad other places. We're talking about Tobago.
Yeah.
And I in my experience, because I have traveled a lot on vacation, a lot in the Caribbean, and you always go back to the places that you have good customer service. And in my opinion, two of the places, Sean, or three of the places that I have always gotten very good customer service, and one of them you'll be very surprised when I say Suriname.
Yes, yes.
I wonder about that.
Grenada and St. Vincent.
Yeah.
Those two. There is a attitude that transcends just customer service. It's something that comes from the people. And I think that is where we need to tweak the Tobago issue here, because it is something that while it is business, it has to come from the individuals as a culture.
Well,
that being said, back to something Keaton said, talk about the rooms.
Okay.
You know, I have compared, you see, price point to price point. When you look at rooms in a lot of the markets, even if you go to places like Panama, you go to Mexico, price point to price point, you have a better room than a lot of the places in Tobago. I'm not saying that Tobago's rooms are all shabby. I mean, there are some hotels that the rooms are decent, but on overall price point to price point, they need some improvement in the way they upgrade their rooms. And I think part of that is funds. If it is that you don't have tourists coming as much, you know.
Well, Kola, I
find in a cycle.
Cole, I find you're very kind, because I would say that they need a lot of improvements. I mean, I understand from the financial point that you know, right now things are tight, but even prior to COVID-19, the standard and quality of the rooms were not that great.
You see the
yes, Keaton. I mean, my thing is, I have tried several hotels in Tobago, and if I go here and I've gone to hotels where I went, I didn't like the room. After 2 days, I just left and went to another one. But I mean, some people can't afford to do that. I have gone to hotels in Tobago, prominent hotels, where I had to ask for insect spray to spray the ants.
Yes. Yes.
You know, so
yeah.
I mean, I would give them, because of COVID, I would give them the latitude to say they're going to improve and see what happens. I would say 2014. Sorry, 2024. Let me see what happens there.
Yeah. Thank you, Kola. Part of the issue is tourism has always been like a red-headed stepchild, where the government of the day will say it's important. To some extent, they'll pay lip service that it's important, but it's not actually, you don't actually see any sort of improvement. And we don't have the regular business to say that we could afford to put a lot of money in to keep things perfect, right? Or at least not every place. Now, there are some operations that really and truly, you know, it's not that great, and it's questionable business-wise and macroeconomic-wise, you know, is it a drain on the industry or not? But the long and short is there are specific challenges, and I think that also goes into customer service, because when other things are given a priority, and basically you're not going to necessarily get the best workers, right? And because the industry is limited, there's limited upward mobility.
Sean, I'd like to respond to that after this call from Shugon.
Because
I'm sorry.
Because remember, you're comparing a by-the-way product to, this is what this island has to do. This is its primary source of survival.
I respect what you are suggesting, but I disagree with you. And I'll explain to you why after this call from Shugon. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Morning.
I will make a question here that I was supposed to ask a few sessions ago when I couldn't get in.
Okay.
When you were talking about some of these undesirable things that government do, and your suggestion is people expect them to do that. So that is why they do this. Now I am saying that came about after the first two sessions of Eric Williams. The first two sessions of Eric Williams did research and see what was good for the country, and did that, and the greatest improvement this country ever had was
Williams was the longest serving. Now, these people, you claim they're doing it because people want that. But every government going there and they do what you say, they lose some support. And they keep doing it and expecting different results. Bear in mind what Einstein said about doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. He says it's a sure sign of madness. And what is indicated to me that our politicians have gone totally mad. Any questions or queries?
Well, my only thing, Professor, is that I believe when Eric Williams started, I could be wrong, but when Eric Williams, his first 2 terms, was it before or during the oil boom?
No, long before. In fact, there was no oil boom.
Right.
Everything Eric Williams do, he had to borrow money.
Oil boom was
to
in the
pay for it.
70s.
So
because the first 2 terms are from 56 to 66.
Right.
And the oil boom only came up in 1970.
My point is, when you don't have money, you have to be very careful and strategic with what you do and what you have. I know you have to be. But what tends to happen in politics is that when you have, a windfall, all of a sudden responsibility goes out the window because you want to distribute the wealth.
In the Scandinavian countries.
Professor,
they're the exception. It happens with most countries.
No, thank you, Professor, for your point. The reason why, forgive me, I'll let Sean finish his point, but because of the 149 being open, we've actually... we did it with most of our calls this morning. We went overtime with calls this morning, and we do apologize. We have to keep in mind that there's 149 that is open and it's working. And it's no fault of ours, to be honest. We're really trying to resolve that issue.
Yeah, so the second phone line is there's an issue with it and they're trying to sort it out. So, but thank you, Professor. Now, I'm not saying, Professor, that's how it's fine that way or that's how it should be. I'm just saying that I believe that's what happened. Eric Williams was in, he had constraints, he had to deal with the constraints. But like with other countries that experienced an oil boom, hence the term Dutch disease, we didn't necessarily deal with winning the lottery very well, like what happens with a lot of lottery winners.
Now, back to my point with respect to the hotel rooms. I hear everything that you're saying, but the reason why I disagree is because I find we make too many excuses. And back to my simple little point about cobweb, about, and this quote from San Fernando mentioned, he had to ask for insecticide just to deal with the ants problem. All right? If a hotel is not broken down, but the facilities look old, look poor, not kept clean, not maintained.
Looking old and not kept clean and maintained are not the same thing.
Not maintained. Well, there was this, actually, what's interesting to me is that there's this one hotel in Tobago that looks grand. It looks absolutely grand. It looks good. It's a hotel in the sense that it's more for an apartment than anything else. And the facilities on the outside, they look good. You say, okay, great, this is going to be a nice... You go into the room and you're like, this is what I'm paying for.
So there's a flip side to that. And we do get foreign customers. And in fact, at least for some of the hotels, the foreign customers that they got, because that's been an issue before COVID for about 10 to 20 years, the dwindling amount of foreign customers. But the ones that we did get liked the product. And in many cases were repeat customers. So I understand what you're saying, and I understand what Mr. San Fernando is saying, but I have to juxtapose that with the fact that to the foreign travelers, right, our product is more than good enough.
Sean, if you're
now, with that said,
if you're speaking specifically
with that, I can't speak for
your investment.
I can't speak for every place on the island.
Right, so that, unfortunately, that cannot stand because that is specific to your investment in tourism in Tobago. So that cannot stand for the island as a whole. Furthermore, you mentioned the government. Now, I completely agree that the ease of doing business, and I'm glad that the IATA conference as well was raised, that does not necessarily apply to Tobago. But the ease of doing business and government support of tourism is not where it should be. It's all well and good said on a campaign trail. But that being said, I keep going prior to COVID-19. I did not see that level of investment.
No, but we've had issues prior to COVID-19.
And
that's what I'm trying to say.
And whilst there were issues, hotels continued to operate.
Right, but they were, listen, the industry was struggling. And because like I said, food and beverages establishments were closing down because the customer bases were drying up in 2019, right? My family was struggling to keep some of our staff for the restaurants just because my brother did not want for anybody to lose their job, which made COVID all the more harder, I think, after struggling for a year to try to keep everybody employed and keep the operation afloat, to then basically have to shut down. It almost made that effort meaningless. That said, foreign customers and travelers, the time period was constantly shrinking from the 80s till the 2010s. The numbers were shrinking. And domestic tourism, unfortunately, comes with the problem that it causes domestic flights to be essentially one-way heavy traffic, which then makes those flights, it's difficult now to not take losses for those Easter periods and August vacation, etc., because the demand does not surge in the opposite direction, and it gives significant challenges there. That's where some of the losses, or a good chunk of the losses from the air bridge and potentially the sea bridge comes from, right? Because when you're running empty, you're more or less running at a loss. And even with that, the amount of customers to sustain the tourism product in Tobago, it was a nice edge, it was a balancing act, because what you're saying is, I essentially only have customers for 2 days of the week.
I will respond after this call. Good morning, caller from Digger Martin.
Hi all, thanks, good morning.
Good morning.
Sean, you always saying people weren't sure of which virus they had, but that's because in the US it was referred to as the tridemic, or the trifecta, because remember there was the RSV, the flu and the COVID, so I guess that's what's also happened here. And well, for China, they're going to be more hell because after New Year's, and remember they went from one extreme to the next, and now
their
trying
Lunar
to
New Year's coming up, so that might be...
vaccinate the elderly. But on the question of the XBB 1.5, that was first sequenced in the US, you know, so people are worried about China, but you have to worry about everywhere else, because that was there sequenced since October last year. And up to 2 days ago, there's been 4,770 cases in the US and UK, but it's also occurring in Germany, Italy, Austria, much of Europe, according to the CDC, right? So it's not only China that you have to worry about, and it's important to note that each country is different from the US and UK, where they're highly vaccinated and boosted. Meanwhile, here we're still at what, 51 or 52? And the government is not going to cancel Gypsy's mother of all carnivals. Again, improper messaging since 2020. They refused to hire the right consultants to educate the public, even though they received funding. So, life has consequences, you know. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, caller. That is a good point. China would only really be a concern if we see a mass spread of the virus that leads to a new variant. Otherwise, for all intents and purposes, it's the same COVID that you're going to find more or less anywhere else.
This is a new variant. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your calls. We had to close the phone lines there. You know, the point that you were making prior to the caller from Digger Martin and her contribution on COVID-19 with respect to domestic travel and foreign tourists. You keep going back to foreign tourists, and I understand that because they bring in a large...
Well, because that really, when the industry was booming, that was a big chunk of it.
Fair enough, right? And foreign currency as well is earned.
Yes.
So I understand that. But honestly, Sean, I'm seeing it, and I mean, it's no secret. If it wasn't for Trinidad, Tobago's tourism industry would collapse.
More or less, yes. But think about the implications of that statement. You know, why should that be so? How did it reach that point where...
And as much as the government is not helping, are hotels marketing themselves in Tobago?
Well,
marketing goes beyond just an advertisement.
So it is a chicken and the egg. Remember, the other nations, the other hotels and other countries in the region, they have their governments marketing for them, right? So to what extent now could an individual small hotel, because most of our hotels are not that big. Yes, there's Magdalena. Magdalena is more or less, I would say, a failed project with regards to the maintenance costs and the sustainability of it.
It's not more or less, it is.
It is, right? So most of the hotels are not that big. So to say that they can market themselves internationally, it's not impossible, but it's difficult. And to compete against Jamaica or Barbados that has like a budget from the government to help market the island in general.
Let me ask you a question with 1 minute left.
1 minute.
1 minute. What's your solution to this entire conundrum? Because I hear in almost everything you have an answer, you have a response, and you keep saying it's difficult and this is not that and that is not this. All right, fine. So as a stakeholder, what's the solution?
There are two things. When I say that we don't have the competitiveness, that is somewhat an extent an indictment of both the people who operate, the people who seek jobs and are employed, but also the policies that affect the labor market and affect the industry. So yes, the industry needs to improve certain things. Their own expectations and standards need to improve. Now, you need to understand, it's difficult to say, look, if you can't do the job this way, I'm going to replace you. Now, yes, Mr. James said he had a lot of applicants, but before COVID, when 80% of the island was hired by the THA,
your 1 minute is up and you didn't answer my question.
Before COVID, it was difficult to get staff, just like with any small business because of European CPEP and all the government hirings. So that is one of the things that need to change. Of course, you can't just change that and then it improves. No. The industry then has to upgrade their standards and their regulations and their expectations. And those operators that cannot operate at a certain level, I would say they should close. However, one of the other things is, throughout all the struggles of tourism in the last 10 years, the government has put a lot of money in grants to keep hotels open without actually being concerned about marketing or maybe the entertainment side of tourism or anything else. All they've done is keep hotels open, try to get flights, and have the Magdalena.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you. 2 minutes and you didn't answer my question. I hope to get
I did answer your question. You don't understand the answer.
You didn't answer my question. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you to all our callers. Thank you very much to Mr. James. And thank you to our directors. Because of time, I'll wrap up on behalf of Sean and I. Just remember, today is a good day to have a good day.
All the way together.
And we'll see you again tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Although the Ukrainians deny that the Russian forces have taken control of that town, they have clearly said this morning that there are large numbers of Russian forces inside the town. What they also say, though, is that it's easier to defend in a way inside the city because there you need fewer defenders per attacker, according to standard military theory. And so the Ukrainians say that they're holding out, defending building by building, and that's why military spokespeople this morning said it really didn't make any sense to talk about what percentage of this town of 10,000 inhabitants before the war, it's really quite a small town, is controlled by either the Russian or the Ukrainian side. What both sides are saying is that intense fighting is continuing. Solidar, I remind you, is 10 kilometers to the northeast of Bakhmut, which is one of the Russians' main targets in the Donbass region. Bakhmut held by the Ukrainians still, despite 7 months of onslaught and very, very significant destruction to that city and to Solidar as well.
That was Gulliver Cragg there reporting from Kyiv. Now, meanwhile, in Moscow, Vladimir Putin has removed Russia's top commander in Ukraine just 3 months after he was installed. Sergei Surovikin has been replaced by Valery Gerasimov. With the details of that reshuffle and the divisions that it may expose within the Russian army, here's Yinka Oyetade.
He's only been in the job for 3 months, but the Russian Defense Ministry says it's stripping General Sergei Surovkin of his role as commander of the country's forces in Ukraine. His replacement will be this man, Valery Gerasimov, the chief of the Russian General Staff. As part of the reshuffle, Surovkin has now effectively been demoted to one of General Gerasimov's deputies alongside 2 other generals. Gerasimov's promotion follows the Colonel General Alexander Lapin's appointment as Chief of Staff of the country's ground forces after he was previously fired for his handling of the war in Ukraine. The 2, alongside the Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, have been the target of heavy criticism over Russia's recent military setbacks on the ground by Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov and Yevgeny Prigozhin, founder of the Wagner Group. Prigozhin has previously called for the 3 men to be sent barefoot to the front line. The promotions effectively put Gerasimov and Lapin in charge of Chechen and Wagner forces in Ukraine, a move sure to anger Kadyrov and Prigozhin. The reshuffle comes as Prigozhin claims that the eastern Ukrainian town of Solidar has been seized by Russian forces led by the Wagner Group. But the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov stopped short of declaring its capture while speaking to reporters on Wednesday, a further sign of disunity between Russian forces.
Well, let's talk more about this with our foreign affairs commentator Douglas Herbert. And Doug, at the end of that report, talk of disunity within the upper echelons of the Russian army. What do you make of that?
Yeah, well, look, no one's sitting in the room, right, with the high Russian command actually hearing what they're all saying to each other. But look, what we can extrapolate here is a no-brainer. Gerasimov is a Putin ally, if not a staunch Putin ally. He is seen as aligned with very much the Kremlin, the Putin, the Russian Ministry of Defense camp. And if you want to sort of make it a black and white issue, they're arrayed against these sort of private militia forces. Both, yes, Prigozhin's Wagner Group right now, whose star has been rising, yes, whom Putin has relied on a lot to wage a lot of the fierce battles in Ukraine, but the Wagner Group's been a real poison chalice in many sense for Putin and the Russian Ministry of Defense. They've become almost sort of rival, competing poles of military offense. So what's happening here is you're basically having Putin make a clear statement. This is my guy. I'm going to put in charge who I want to be in charge, and ultimately we're the ones calling the shots. And it's really a rebuke in a way to Prigozhin. It's a rebuke to Prigozhin, putting him in his place and saying, we have our people in place, and ultimately our commanders are not necessarily going to be your best friends. They're going to be the people that I can give the commands to, for the Russian army.
Now, there is growing speculation right now, Doug, that Russia, while all this fighting is going on in eastern Ukraine that we've been reporting on, that it may actually open another front in this war in the north via Belarus. What do you make of that? Do you think that's going to happen?
Look, even if Zelensky himself, even if Western experts themselves, are downplaying the prospect of another invasion, if you will, an assault, using Belarus as a springboard, as we saw earlier last year, as an assault, a springboard for an assault in Ukraine, there's obviously fears. Look, last month, mid-December, December 19th to be precise, Putin paid an unusual visit to Minsk to meet face-to-face with Alexander Lukashenko. Usually it's the other way around, Lukashenko jetting off to Moscow to spend time with his buddy there, Putin. But in this case, what did they talk about? The things that they talked about are what's causing a lot of the speculation. They talked about sort of shoring up their coordination on things like ballistic missiles, on even adapting a nuclear-capable warplane, such as the Su-24 warplane. There's been a lot of military sort of coordination between Russia and Belarus, with a lot of military exercises. It doesn't mean we've seen a buildup of Russian troops on the border with Ukraine and Belarus, as we saw on the eve of the invasion, when Russia was denying what invasion? No invasion. This is all Western, hypothesizing. But what we do have is a clear scenario in which Putin sees Lukashenko as a useful ally. Lukashenko has relied heavily on Putin, even if it's an alliance of convenience at times, and Lukashenko has got out on a limb to try to make it clear he doesn't want Belarus and its soldiers to get implicated and involved in this war. He doesn't want to be at the beck and call of Putin. But like I said, it's a very awkward dynamic here. He has been dependent in many times on Putin to shore up his power base when Lukashenko is threatened. And right now, you have a situation where Putin does seem to be very much the big brother in this relationship and putting a lot of pressure on, even if Russia will deny that it's doing anything of the kind.
And, whether that offensive happens or not, Ukraine has been saying for a long time, look, to Western allies, we need far more weaponry. Do you think they're going to get that in the coming weeks? Do you see any changes?
Yeah, it does look like. I mean, each time we've had in little dribs and drabs the West sending weapons, it gets a little bit bigger, a little bit heavier, a little bit more offensive each time around as the war gets intense. What has been the Western restraint line all along? It's been they don't want to do anything that's going to antagonize Putin, to escalate the war, to create unnecessary conflict, as if there's not already conflict with Russia. The fact of the matter is, Putin already sees the West as a belligerent, as practically a party to this war. So no matter what the West does, and the West is coming to this conclusion, it needs to help Ukraine. That is more and more capitals. So Poland and the UK look like they are going to very soon be delivering heavy combat tanks. Earlier, we saw Germany, France, and the U.S. in the past couple of weeks announce light tanks. What Ukraine wants are the heavier ones that go in conjunction with the light ones. Looks like they may be getting them. Germany has been a holdout.